Okay, and hello everyone, and welcome to Surrey JLD's third and final event for Mental Health Awareness Week. So whilst Mental Health Awareness Week was last week, as we all know, mental health awareness isn't just for 1 week. Thank you all for joining on what is certainly down south, a very warm Thursday evening. And I do appreciate you all giving up your evening to be here today. Of course, we're joined by the amazing Leah Steele, who is a burnout and resilience trainer, mentor, and former lawyer. She'll be delivering a session on burnout, which I'm sure you will all find very useful. As you can see, the session is being recorded, but again, I'll stop the recording for the Q&A so that everyone can feel comfortable to share their experiences and their questions. So enough from me, and over to you, Leah.
Thank you so much. So thank you everybody for joining us. I fully appreciate that today is a day where you do want to be in the pub, you do want to be relaxing. So if anybody's watching this on a replay, well done. But for those of you who are here, brilliant, thank you. So I'm hopefully going to talk for about 40 minutes, ideally less, but I am a bit mouthy. So if it goes on longer, we'll just scream at me if it's too long. I'm going to talk for a little bit, talking you through some burnout, what it is, how to identify it, some things that we need to understand, and hopefully will help you to have a more sustainable career. But before I dive into it, I just want to do a little bit of housekeeping. This session is being recorded. There will be a Q&A at the end. If you have a question, please do pop it in the chat if you want to make sure it's there. I am easily distracted, so if I start answering questions as I go, I will never get to the end of it. I will be distracted by shiny things and it will just be a massacre. So I'm going to ignore the chat for now, pop your questions in there. If there's something that you would like to ask, but you don't want to say it in front of everybody else, this is a safe space. So what you can do instead is go to the chat, select my name from the drop down, Leah Steele, and send it to me directly. I will then treat it as an anonymous question. So I will, once we've come off the recording and we're having the Q&A, I will then anonymize your question to ask it to the rest of the group and then answer it myself. But of course, you can come off video at the end and go through any questions you have there as well. So let's dive into it. My aims are that by the end of this session, you will, this is a really big ask first out of the bat, but hey, have a structure and support system to help you implement change. This is really important. I want this to be a session where you actually implement something, even if it's tiny, even if it's really small, so that you understand what burnout is, identify how it shows up, and hopefully we've expanded your toolkit to cope, but all of those things will be something you actively do. Okay, so I don't want this to be a session where you just go and go, oh, that's one CPD, thanks very much, guys, and put it in the folder. Actually see what you can change, because as we're going to talk about, burnout isn't just about individuals, it's a lot of us. So let's start with something a little bit interactive just to make sure you're all awake. Do you know your worth? Now, anyone here is on Instagram or TikTok, you see this a lot, right? It's usually on some kind of like pastel pink background. You just need to know your true worth, your true value. And if you're anything like me, you see something like that, shrink into a tiny little ball and feel awful, because what the hell does that mean? So we're going to put a money figure on it. We're going to be really clear about this. So I would like each of you in the chat to tell me, what is your hourly rate? What is your current charge hour rate? Not what you're paid, that's a whole other session, but what do you charge? What's in your engagement letter? Because this is a really quick, easy and dirty way of getting into what is your worth. Now, I'm going to get my calculator out for this one, because maths, I used to be a tax and trust lawyer, believe it or not, but maths is not my strong suit. So we've got Alice is 2. I'm not doing the VAT because I will just die. I remember when it was still 15%. We've got Martin's on 215, Snape's on 225, Kaylee's on 745, Seema's 180. Okay, so that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 people, right? So all of you for this session, if you were all charging, we would have a combined value of £1,500 essentially for 1 hour. Okay. If we then say, okay, we're going to be really generous. Say you're all working at the same firm and your employers only want you to do 5 hours chargeable a day, which, does anyone's firm only have 5 hours chargeable a day? Because I'm seeing more like 6 to 7 to 12 at the moment. So 5 hours a day. That's just under 8 grand a day, just for this group, small group of people. So that's for one day. We'll times it by 5. Each week, you guys are generating 40 grand, and 48 weeks of a year, 1.9 million. You guys are right. Pretty, I mean, obviously, we've got a bit of variation in the hourly rates, but 1.9 million, that's how much you guys worth. And then we divide it out by the number of people. So we say that 380,000 a year is what you guys are worth on average. That's more than my house, I think. 380 grand. So what I want to be really clear about is you are a valuable asset. You, as an individual, are a product, because that's what happens when we come to law firms, right? Somebody comes in and goes, I want a divorce, I want to buy a house, I want to whatever, sue my family members over somebody's death, which is what I used to do. They are coming for the advice, for the work that we produce. But that's not the firm, that's the individuals, that's the lawyers. So if you guys are all worth on average nearly 400 grand a year, that's quite a valuable product, right? How much care do you deserve? Now, I want to be really clear about this. When I'm talking about this, it's a really stupid metric, obviously. But it's not just about what you bill, because that's the first thing we go to, right? How much have I billed this week, this month, this year? Have I done my chargeables? Therefore, I'm worth something. Nah. When we're talking about you as a product and underpinning this training with what you are as a product, we're talking about your training. All of that information that is locked up inside your little melon. We're talking about your expertise, the expertise that you've already developed and the expertise that is growing day on day. We're talking about your marketing. How many of you have posted on LinkedIn about this session? Great marketing for me. Thank you very much. Please do more of it. But you know, you're raising your profile for the firm. You're talking about the work you bring in. I had this argument at a firm I worked at once. I had just missed my bonus target. 3.2, 3.5 times your salary, and I was 2 grand under at the end of the year because I'd been off sick and my colleagues hadn't chased the bill for me. And so they said, well, you don't get your bonus of several £1,000s. And I said, okay, that's my billing target, but I brought in a £6.5 million court of protection case earlier this year for another department. So what share of that billing is going into my target? Oh, none of it. So it's not just your billing, it's what you're creating around you, right? It's really important. It's not just what you bill, it's also the work that you decline and the complaints that you avoid, because they're really expensive. Have you heard about what's going on with professional indemnity insurance these days? Like, it's pricey. So making sure that you're not getting in front of the disciplinary tribunal every 5 minutes is a good idea. It's about your compound growth as well. So you're a product. We're talking, you know, JLD here. So you guys are still at a relatively junior end of the spectrum. But what you've got today is going to be built on tomorrow, next year, and 10 years from now. And so that product is growing and developing. It's like when you buy your iPhone and then you end up getting the AirPods and then you end up getting the MacBook to sync to it. Or, you know, you're growing. There's going to be add-ons and bolt-ons. You're going to be an upsell. So sounds daft, right? What is your value? What are you worth? But I want to start right now with that real money concept, because it's really easy for us to leave these sessions and go, oh, well, you know, that's nice, but I'll do that once the billing's done, once the recoverables are done, once I've looked after my great Aunt Martha's 20-year-old cat. You, as a whole person, as well as what you bring to your firm, deserve to be taken care of. And let's just put this into a little bit of context, shall we? So this car is half of what you guys are worth a year, right? Porsche 911, 992. This is a genuine car that is available just around the corner from my house at, I kid you not, Dick Lovett, which is the name of the dealership. I love that. 175 grand for a Porsche, right? So you could have 2 of those a year for what you are, quote, worth to your firm. But how much care would you take of the car? Would you sling it around the corner to the little garage that does MOTs for 40 quid and that's about it? Or would you be taking it back to the wonderfully named Dick Lovett to get it serviced and valeted? Would you be like, oh God, this is going to be a reference people probably aren't going to get, but like Joey when he had the boxes and he was tending to his Ferrari on the street, right? we put a lot of love into very expensive products. I got this new phone last week and I've already got a beautiful MagSafe case for it. And I don't even have a MagSafe charger, but I've bought it already. But how much care do we take for you? Now, this is a stock photo of a lawyer. You know it's a lawyer because she's got the scales of justice on her desk, and obviously that's what we all need in order to be actual lawyers. But I also wanted to put this quote in front of you. It's Audre Lorde. Caring for myself is not self-indulgence. It is self-preservation. And that is an act of political warfare. We have this concept, this very, and I'm going to say it, this white-centered concept of self-care as being like a Radox bubble bath at the end of the day, going to the spa and getting your nails done and getting a massage, treat yourself. It's not. It's not self-indulgence, it's self-preservation. Now, that vehicle, you'd probably get it cared for, you get it serviced, you get it checked, you get the oil done. You wouldn't do what I did with the Nissan Micra I drove in 2005, which is drive around with the oil warning light on all the time, because it's valuable. So are you. Let's start with that, shall we? So why do we care about burnout, and why on earth am I the one talking to you about it? Very nervous, given I know who is attending this session this evening, but let's focus on a few stats first of all. It's much easier for me to talk about burnout in the context of stats because then it's real, right? It's not just something we feel or that we're worried about. It's real and it's happening to other people and it's objective. Now, the reason why I'm talking to you about this is I was a lawyer. I left law 5 years ago after nearly 12 years working as a paralegal and then as a qualified solicitor. I worked in personal injury law, contentious probate and high value court of protection over the course of that period of time. I left my career working for a top 50 law firm with a portfolio of clients that were valued in the region of about 100 million. And I left law because I had experienced burnout. And actually, as a result of experiencing burnout, decided to try and help other people instead of just doing what I was doing. But the reason why I talk to so many lawyers is one, because I speak law, and two, because all of this is built within the framework of what we can reasonably do within our firms, what we can actually achieve without looking for some kind of utopia, right? Because that's lovely. I would love to win the lottery and be lying on a lilo in a pool all day, but I can't guarantee that. So what I've got to do is manage my stress in the meantime and then keep playing the Euro Millions. Somebody just up the road from me won it this week, so I'll keep going. So let's look at some of the objective stats about why burnout is important, right? I think most people here probably know about law care. Law care, which provides health support, practical and emotional support for lawyers. And the survey, the Life in the Law survey that came out last October, they found that participants averaged 42.2 on the Oldenburg burnout inventory. There's a couple of different scales that can be used. We've got the Maslach burnout inventory, the Oldenburg burnout inventory, and a few others. But what was really worrying for me is the average score was at high risk of burnout. And in particular, the exhaustion, which is part of burnout, scored at 3.36 out of 4. It doesn't get much higher. And that's the average across the whole industry. Like, what were the extremes looking like here? That was the average. We all know about the JLD 2019 findings, I think. This is the one that shook the industry because 93% of junior lawyers experiencing stress in the previous month, 25% essentially experiencing extreme or severe stress. I'm shocked that people were shocked by that, but you know, not everybody sees what I see probably. And Protectivity, which is an insurance company, the same year said that 63% of the lawyers they surveyed were stressed, and we were the second most stressed profession in the UK, second only to HR. And that was 2019. Can you imagine how lawyers in the HR felt in 2020? There are not that many updated stats at the moment for good reason. I think if we take all of the stats, we are going to be terrified. I thought this one was interesting because family law in particular is one of the most viewed, reported on areas of law because resolution advocates so much for lawyers. And this came out in May 2021, saying that half of family lawyers have considered quitting in the previous 3 years over wellbeing concerns. Not half have considered quitting because it's an area of law that's really stressful and doesn't pay well and people tend to scream at you a lot. No, actually wanted to quit because of the well-being concerns. 26% of family lawyers were actively looking to leave. And this isn't just solicitors, this is legal execs, barristers, the entire industry, a quarter of people looking to leave, and that half of those were junior lawyers. Why I found this interesting was the issues that were cited as to why people wanted to leave were long working hours, heavy workloads, client expectations, and working in isolation. Now, this is family law. Let's take that to wills and probate. Let's take that to personal injury. Let's take it to corporate commercial. Do we all have long working hours, heavy workloads, unreasonable client expectations, and during lockdown had to work in isolation? I think it's easy to say who doesn't have at least one of those, right? This is from Deloitte's study. So Deloitte had contributed to one of the big studies around mental health in the workplace, which was the Stevenson and Farmer report in 2017. But Deloitte did an update in 2021. And this isn't just about lawyers, this is everybody. 77% of professionals have experienced burnout at their current job. Now, obviously, this is self-reported, but they talked about burnout drivers. Biggest drivers, 31% said a lack of support or recognition from leadership, wink, wink. 30%, unrealistic deadlines or results expectations, clients, and 29% consistently working long hours or on weekends. Again, we can probably all see at least one of those in our work or the people around us. So this is why burnout matters, but what is it? Because it's great to say that something's important, but we need to know why it's important and how it shows up. So this is the definition from the World Health Organization. It's in the International Classification of Diseases, volume 11, that was published at the beginning of the year. Basically, that's the big fat book of all the reasons why you might ever need to see a doctor. Now, burnout itself is not a medical diagnosis. This is the first thing to say. This is why it's easier for me to talk about burnout than mental health, right? Because we're not talking about a diagnosis, so it's not quite scary. It shouldn't be scary. We know it shouldn't be taboo. But, you know, whatever gets people talking. So it's not a medical diagnosis, but it is in there as an occupational phenomenon. And what that means is it's a reason why doctors may interact with somebody. So it's not a diagnosis itself, but it is something that could cause you to see a doctor. It's caused me to see a doctor. This is their definition. They say burnout is a syndrome conceptualized as resulting from chronic workplace stress that has not been successfully managed. It's characterized by 3 dimensions: things with energy depletion or exhaustion, increased mental distance from one's job, or things with negativism or cynicism related to one's job, and reduced professional efficacy. Now, this definition was thrown up in 2019 or so. It's taken them that long to publish the new ICD-11, so I just tend to ignore this little bit at the bottom. I read it like a disclaimer when it says, burnout refers specifically to phenomena in the occupational context, it should not be applied to experiences in other areas of life. Because I don't know if you've noticed, but work and life kind of collided a couple of years ago. But also, there's a floodgates argument here, of course. We want to talk about this in an occupational context. We don't want to talk about unpaid carers or parents. We don't want to talk about needs in society, because that's a bit more wider and that's a bit more worrying. So for the purposes of this training, we're going to talk about the occupational context. But if you're a parent, if you are an unpaid carer, if you're a volunteer, if you support something, and any of this makes sense, just because you're not getting a P60 or a P45, to my mind, doesn't change it, okay? This is my definition of burnout, because that one's really wordy. I think that burnout is a collection of physical and emotional symptoms that arise when someone who cares about doing a good job works too hard for too long with too little care and reward. It happens to the best and brightest who give generously of themselves and ask for too little in return. Does that feel about right? Does anyone else realise that that's an incredibly self-serving definition for me to write as somebody who's experienced burnout? But that's why I get to say it and you're all on mute. Thank you, Kaylee. That one to me makes sense, because we give a lot of ourselves. All of us at some point have questioned, probably on a daily basis at some points, why we got into law. And more often than not, it comes down to something like, I can make a difference. I can help people. I can make a change. I became a lawyer because at the age of 9, a lawyer changed my life. And took me from a scary place to somewhere that wasn't scary and where I wasn't at risk all the time. And so my 9-year-old brain went, I want to do that. because if I'm doing that, then I'm not scared and at risk, right? It didn't quite work out, but we'll try. So that's my definition of burnout that usually hits a little close to home. Let's break down what it means, right? We are bringing out the puppies of burnout. Burnout is a syndrome conceptualized as resulting from chronic workplace stress that has not been successfully managed. Now, this puppy is giving serious side eye. And the reason for that is this. When this definition came out, everybody I know messaged it to me. It was when I first realized that I was becoming known as that burnout. I'm not going to say the word, it was alliterative, but that woman who talks about burnout a lot. And everybody was sending me this, and I read the definition, and my immediate response was anger. Burnout is something that arises from chronic workplace stress that's not been successfully managed. Oh, I'm sorry, am I not trying hard enough? Not just me, everybody, right? And it took me a long time to actually work myself down out of that rage, surprisingly, being a ginger ex-litigator. But this is what it means. So the first thing we need to understand is what chronic workplace stress is. Chronic means it occurs over a significant period of time. It may not be the big acute stuff that we think of when we think stress. We think, oh my God, deadlines. We think, oh my God, that client screamed down the phone at me. System's going wrong. They're acute. They happen, but they resolve quickly, right? It's like those ECGs where you see the big spikes. We're talking about the stuff that's in the middle. So what do you think the most obvious chronic workplace stress that isn't successfully managed is? I'll give you a hint. Can anybody please put in the chat if at any point over the last month they have completely cleared their desk of all work and had nothing to do? Has anybody successfully completed all their work, not just reactive, but proactive, cleared your email inbox, done that blog that someone's been singing you about for months? Who's been spinning on their work chair? No. Is that possible? That's the dream? Nope. That's how it works in law, right? I once genuinely watched one of my colleagues have a full existential crisis because he had proactively managed all of his work and had nothing left to do. He had done the blogs for the website, he had done all the marketing, he had responded to all of his clients, he had sent things to counsel, and he sat there and for about 18 minutes, of course it was 18 minutes, it was 3 units, he crumbled. He did not know what to do. I sent him off to make drinks for all of us. That gave him purpose for a few minutes. And then again, his entire definition of self came crashing down around him. And that was the only time I think he'd been in law for 15 years at that point, that he had run out of work to do. It never happened to me unless I'd quit a job. And even then I tended to be the person that left at 9 p.m, right? On the last day, carrying all my bags, thinking, shit, I can't get back in the building. So when we're talking about chronic workplace stress, first of all, we all have it. We have a stack it high model in law. Don't get me started on resource management in law firms. It's a whole other trading, a whole like day-long rant. But that's what we're talking about, chronic workplace stress that's not successfully managed, because it's successfully managed if I can walk away from it. Either because it's done, it's resolved, my work is all done, or because I can successfully divorce myself from it. How many of us are able to do that? You don't have to answer that one if you don't want to. We need to think about individual and group responsibility. It's really easy to attend these trainings and be given a little checklist of stuff that you need to go and do. That doesn't work unless you're in an environment that supports it. So burnout has systemic factors, by which I mean you can be the most resilient person in the world, but if you're sitting in the work equivalent of a vat of hydrochloric acid, you're still going to dissolve. Okay, it's nothing that doesn't dissolve in enough acid. It's the same with a work environment. If it's causing problems around you, sort of sticking your fingers in your ears, shutting your eyes and screaming la 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 and ignoring it all, you're going to be affected. Okay. So this definition's got 3 parts. Number 1, feelings of energy depletion or exhaustion. It is 7:30 on a Thursday night. I don't need to tell any of you what feelings of energy depletion or exhaustion feel like. But if you feel like this puppy on a Monday morning too, that's a question mark. We have normalized as a society, but also as an industry, we have normalized exhaustion, overwhelm and stress. To be honest, I don't put this on the slides, but we've fetishized it. Let's be honest. You know, when somebody goes, how are you doing? You're like, I'm just so busy. What do we actually mean? Oh, I'm just so important. I'm so needed. I'm so wanted. But we have this industry that requires us to be busy all the time, that we can never stop work. We can never walk away from it because it ties to our purpose and who we are as people. Burnout factor risk right there. It's okay to have coffee until wine time. How many of us have taken a day off to catch up on life admin in the last 6 months? I had to do it, and I have an admin assistant. Increase mental distance from one's job or feelings of negativism or cynicism. This one stumped me because, okay, I'm a former contentious probate lawyer, so negativity and cynicism is just par for the course. Clients will come in and go, I want to see my relatives for £1 million, but it's not about the money, it's about the principle of the thing. And of course I was like, yeah, of course it is, love, because you'd be here if it wasn't money. So negativity and cynicism as a coping strategy, I totally get. You have to have that in some areas, particularly when there's a lot of emotional involvement. We use it as a shield to distance ourselves from our clients when empathy is painful. But increased mental distance from one's job, I struggled with. And then I remembered this time I'd gone to a training event. So I live in Bristol, I was working in Cardiff. The training event was in London because of course none of us ever operate outside of London. That's where all law is. And so I'd been up since 5 a.m. I've been working since 7 a.m. I had to travel into London to go to this training event where somebody just wasted my time. It was just blown smoke up their own backside, talking about how wonderful they were. And I had to attend because it was mandatory. And I was furious. I was absolutely furious. But I suddenly realized I was looking around the room and everybody else was enraptured. They were really engaged in this training. He was talking about a mediation that had gone well. And everybody else is there, glowy eyes, you know, cartoon light bulbs over their head. And I'm sitting there thinking, are you kidding me? What am I doing here? This is a waste of my time. And the phrase that went through my head at that point was, I don't care about mediation because I'm just a blunt instrument people use to bash their relatives. That is not what I think about contentious probate as a job. Certainly wasn't how I felt about my work. I would defend it to the death, and I still do. I love proprietary estoppel. But that distance between where I started as an 8-year-old who wanted to help people and that thought in my head that night, I'm just a blunt instrument that people use to bash their relatives with, that's the increased mental distance, right? That's being removed from where we started. That's the negativity and cynicism coming in. So if you have those phrases going around work like, oh, we're just bums on seats, you know, rolling your eyes when clients say it's not about the money, or if you are just feeling a lack of engagement and the lack of purpose in your work and you used to feel it, that's what we're talking about here. And then the third part of burnout, reduced professional efficacy. This is tomorrow at 3 p.m. for all of us, right? But what's really interesting is reduced professional efficacy, first of all, we can put a figure on, because Deloitte, for example, says that presenteeism costs UK employers 29 billion a year. Presenteeism is showing up to do a job when you know you can't do your best work. It's reduced professional efficacy, right? Reduced professional efficacy means no matter what I do, I never catch up on my work, I never feel on top of it. The harder I work, the harder it becomes, because what happens? We've got this cycle that happens. I'm going to work really hard, I'm going to do overtime to catch up on all my work, but then the next day I'm completely knackered, exhausted. Okay, so I'll catch up again. It's fine. I'll catch up. Oh my God, I'm so exhausted. I can't keep up with this, but I need to keep going. And then we have the negativity and cynicism swirling in the middle. And it does this the whole time until it becomes this vortex that just drags us down. Okay. So those are the three key factors of burnout and understanding what is chronic workplace stress that's not successfully managed. Does anyone feel a little bit like this kitty at this point? It's okay if you do. We know that our jobs are inherently stressful. We know that law is inherently stressful, but we are not doomed. Here's why. Burnout takes time to progress, right? So I bring it down to these 5 stages of burnout. Other people will say there's 12 stages of burnout, but I like this because we've got stage 1, the honeymoon stage. It's when you first joined. It's when you just finished your law degree. You were bright and sunny and energized and your skin was perfect without an Instagram filter. And it was just wonderful, right? Everything that came up, no matter how shitty it was like, oh my God, this is a brilliant challenge. Oh my God, I'm getting to develop my skills. And then we had these initial challenges. We all have them, either at an early stage of our career or an early stage of an employment with somebody, where it's like the world just shifts slightly. What we thought isn't what is. So this could be thinking that your new employer is brilliant and then finding out that something really bad has happened. It could be bad behavior. It could be realizing that actually it's not always meritocratic, and sometimes people get promoted for reasons that aren't because they've done a good job. Boss's son. But it's that thing that sticks with you. For me, it's sitting in a room with my boss who was bullying me. And I was too stupid to realize it was bullying. I wasn't stupid. I was just used to people talking down to me. And it was only when my colleagues took me to one side and said they'd been making notes ready for the employment tribunal that I realized this was not reasonable. But it took that to shake me. And it's one of those moments that will stick with me. Then we have this plateau. This is the traditional montage scene in the movie where you're improving the skills and you're developing, and we go from struggling in the lake to being able to hold her up over our heads at the end of the dance with the white dress, right? It's that progression. But what's happening is we're usually giving more than we're receiving. We're expending more energy than we're recovering. We're working hard, we're pushing, and we don't really know when to stop. And we hit crisis. Crisis could be being sick. It could be something outside of work. It could be this case that you've been working on suddenly goes terribly wrong, but there's some kind of drop moment. And it's when the adrenaline suddenly stops and the pushing and pushing because it will be okay once it's over stops. For me, I'd recently qualified, I'd moved firms, I was very nervous, and then all of a sudden, in the space of a couple of weeks, I moved firms, I fell down the stairs at work, my mum was rushed to hospital, and just all of these things that were just a huge energy drain. And then we got stage 5, habitualized burnout. And that's where Wile E. Coyote comes in. Because habitualized burnout, it's really simple. We go back to that definition. It means you're waking up every day exhausted, struggling with your productivity, not doing as much as you want to be able to do, and feeling negative or cynical or disengaged. It's Wile E. Coyote when he's run off the cliff, right? Because in habitualized burnout, we've run off the cliff. We are running, we are going, and then all of a sudden we look down and realize there is nothing underneath our feet. And that's when he drops each time. So habitualized burnout is running off the cliff and not realizing you're running through thin air. That feel about right? So how we end up burned out, I break it down to 3 simple things because we need it to be simple to be able to implement stuff, right? It's obviously a lot more complex than this, but we'll start here. We all have beliefs. I'm not talking religious, I'm just talking thoughts and feelings. It could be religious as well. And they drive our behaviors. I'll talk you through this in a second. So our beliefs drive our behaviors. And then what we do is engage in these maladaptive coping mechanisms. And between those 3 things, we can adjust each of them. We can do little bits in each area to help recover our burnout, to stop us going down the same path and doing the same thing over and over again. So beliefs driving behaviors is, I think something, so I do it. So the example here is, I have imposter syndrome. Who am I to do this? Oh my God, I feel when somebody finds out that I'm here and they realize that I don't deserve to be here, they're going to escort me from the building. So, okay, I'm really in discomfort. I need to do something about that. This is what we do with everything. I'm hungry, I need to eat. I'm exhausted, I need to sleep. I'm upset, I'm going to do stuff to make myself feel better. And so with imposter syndrome, we do things like, I'm going to overwork. I'm going to try to add value everywhere. I'm going to do all the things so people really love me. I'm going to look for the qualifications to make me feel good, to prove to people that I am good enough, not that I feel it. I'm going to do all of these things to try and negate the belief. I haven't stopped thinking it, but I'm doing them because of it, right? And maladaptive coping mechanisms, well, a healthy coping mechanism fixes the problem, right? It helps you to deal with it. I'm hungry, I eat. I'm tired, I sleep. A maladaptive coping mechanism, it doesn't fix the problem. It just keeps us functional. So I'm hungry, I'll go out and have a cigarette. I'm tired, I'll have 3 coffees. I'm going to do these things that are short-term fixes, sticking plaster on a broken leg, but that'll work, right? Limits what I'm doing. So one of the maladaptive coping mechanisms that most people don't even realize we're doing is relying on anxiety as an energy source. waiting for the adrenaline to kick in before the hearing, because then it'll all be good. You know, the coffee isn't working, the sugar isn't working, the other things that you might be doing to give yourself energy aren't working. Well, anxiety is always there. It's really handy. But actually becoming aware of when that's happening, because as a maladaptive coping mechanism, how much energy is it taking from your body versus the return you're getting? How are you getting to that point that anxiety is fueling you, right? This is really important as well for neurodivergency, because we tend to have ADHD superpowers. We have the anxiety energy. We have the things that we feel suddenly create these outcomes for us. So if you've said, for example, oh yeah, I always thrive really well under stress. As soon as that adrenaline kicks in, I'm great. That's wonderful. What's it doing to your body and your mind? What's happening that you're getting to that point, and how do you recover from it? So taking those three things, how do we take a proactive approach to preventing and reversing burnout? These are 4 really simple questions that I get every client to go through. So the first thing is we start now. If here, talking about beliefs and behaviors and maladaptive coping mechanisms, you've sat there and gone, oh God, she's watching what I've done and she's realized, then that's fine. All we need to do is, for example, identify those beliefs like imposter syndrome, or I'm not good enough, or who am I to do this, or, you know, if I can just prove myself, it'll all be safe. And we get to address that. Therapy has a huge place in this, because often what we do in our professional lives, we've been doing in our personal lives as well. So it's a double duty, and it helps us if we get therapy with it. But also, this is where coaching comes in, with changing the behaviors, identifying the beliefs, and just changing what we're doing as an outcome. So identify them. Where do you feel uncomfortable? Where have I said something that's made you feel like I'm being mean to you? Hold it up. Do I stand by this? Is this helpful? What would I do differently? And I'll give you some tools to take away for that as well. But starting right here, we can take a step back and look at our work and say, okay, really simple. What works well? What is good? What is working well for me? What doesn't work well for me? Okay, so bearing in mind those, what am I missing and what do I need? So it could be, what works really well is I love my job. What doesn't work is there's way too much of it. What I'm missing is some support or some validation, or somebody to come in and say, hey, that's a hell of a lot of work. And so what I need is to be able to raise that. Do you see how those 4 questions just link together to give us a structure? So we've got the niggling feeling around beliefs, behaviors, and maladaptive coping mechanisms, and then we've got structure to start figuring out something tangible to do. Put it together afterwards, see how you feel. This is a hot chocolate task, by the way. You get a hot chocolate, you sit down in the cafe for 20 minutes, and you work it through. I want you to think about burnout as living in your energy overdraft, okay? So we know, my thumb is twitching. We know that if you get paid on the 1st of the month, but you spend more than you've got coming in each month, you're going to get deeper into your overdraft. Burnout is the same. We start in a position where we're in the black. We might even have savings, you know. This is back in the day. You remember when we used to go clubbing like 6 nights a week during the degree, and it would all be fine because you could get up and you could still go to classes and maybe throw up in the break, but it'll be fine, and go out the next night. I mean, I worked pretty much full time whilst doing my law degree, and volunteered in the courts and did a dissertation and went out clubbing 5, 6 nights a week. And yet I could still do that because I had savings in the energy overdraft system, right? But then as that keeps going, I'm eroding it away and eroding it away. And so if I'm not putting more money back into the account, I'm going to end up broke. I'm going to be in my overdraft. I'm going to be up against my overdraft limit. When we're talking about it in burnout, this means I'm spending more time expending energy than I'm receiving back. This isn't just about sleeping or having a weekend of just lying in front of Netflix as well, by the way. This is the difference between active and passive rest. So passive rest, getting a nap. Active rest is doing the things that reward you, re-energize you, reinvigorate you. Okay, so that's where the volunteering, or in my case, putting together gift sets on training documents, all comes in. Remember I talked at the beginning about how you are a product. So what do you need in order to do your best work? You wouldn't take that Porsche 911 and say, well, I'm not going to worry about changing the oil in it. It's just going to have to cope, okay? But we do that to ourselves all the time, don't we? No, I just need to overcome it. I just need to get through it. I just need to be more resilient. So instead, if we said, what does this product need in order to work effectively? And we apply that to a person instead of a thing, well, we'd start doing things like working with the energy, right? Working with the thing that we've got in front of us, the product in front of us, not an idealized version. You don't pick up a Motorola Razr flip phone from 2002 and go, well, why is it not taking photographs as good as Leah's iPhone? Because it's a completely different product. So you work with where you are and you respond to where you are. So this means, for example, paying attention to your energy. What increases or decreases your energy at work? What engages you and what exhausts you? Respond to that appropriately. Somebody once said to me, okay, so I'm traveling 3 hours a day. I'm a trainee solicitor. By the time I get to Friday, I am exhausted. How do I make sure I can still function on a Friday? And that's the wrong question to ask, because you can't change the fact that you've commuted for 12 hours by that point and that you've had a really full-on week and you've been working hard. Instead, move things around to support yourself. If you aren't able to change the status quo, you can change the way you're responding to it, right? We don't need more energy all the time, because that's not possible. Unless you've got a lot of sherbet and a lot of Percy Pigs, because that's what I used to do. Percy Pigs at 9:30 in the morning, everybody can write a letter of claim at that point. But paying attention to what you need, not an idealized version of yourself, not what you think a good lawyer would do. You are the product. Give yourself what you need, okay? And this is just something, again, it's one of these hot chocolate tasks, but consider your capacity for stress. Our capacity for dealing with stress, remember, burnout is something that arises as a result of workplace stress that's not successfully managed. But our capacity for stress is relatively fixed. We can respond to short, acute crises, so long as we don't have to do lots of it, right? So you can run a marathon maybe once a year. What happens if you run it every day? Well, your feet basically fall off after a while, right? You get blood everywhere, it's exhausting, you bust your knees. We can't run at this rate the whole time. We can't keep doing all of this. So we need to rest and recover. So I've given you this little bullseye target with some axes, is the word I'm looking for, on it. I want you to think about some of these stressors or these varieties of stress that I'm talking about here, and how would you plot them on that graph? So the ones that I've got here are noise and friction. The way I think of this is noise is the thing that distracts you. It takes away your energy without you really realizing it's background. So in the context of an open plan office, it's sitting at your desk and somebody's yammering on 3 desks over and you can't quite switch them off, right? It's the background noise of everyone around you. But friction, it takes away your energy at the point you're trying to develop. So the same as your tires in your car on the road are reducing the energy that you have to drive the car further forward. With friction, it's the things that stop you, that hold you back. So the system's going down. IT errors, sorry. It is coming up against red tape. Love a bit of red tape in our work, don't we? It's coming up against a computer says no employees at the court system. Whatever it might be, it's something that's going to stop you. So it's not just pulling away behind you, it's stopping you at the point of entry, right? Intensity. How has the intensity of your work changed over the last couple of years? This could be because work's more complex, people are more difficult, clients are more stressed generally across the board because you're working more solo now, you're developing a skill set and you've got cases in your own name instead of assisting. Quantity. We all know about quantity of stress. We all have too much work. We discussed this earlier. But also, when we're thinking about quantity, it's not just I have X number of files. It then relates to this intensity. It relates to the complexity of the work that's in there. Developmental. We all think that we should just be able to learn and it's fine. It's not. It takes a huge amount of energy. Our brains are constantly trying to adapt to everything that we're learning. So developmental stress is learning new things and integrating them instead of them going in one ear and out the other. That's a huge amount of stress, energy transfer, whatever you want to think of it. And external versus internal. So again, we've got these systems around us with burnout. So external factors are your boss saying, you need to get your chargeables up. Don't forget you've got to hit your target. Make sure that you go to all those networking events. Make sure you're posting on LinkedIn about everything. And the internal stressors are, I need to prove my worth. I need to make sure that I'm doing all the right things. I need to go and develop my CPD. I need help with this. So it's coming from within instead of being applied to you. If you were picking up any of those and plotting them on the graph, scale of 1 to 5, how big are they? And then connecting them up across the different axes, how big is that space in the middle? Your stress blob, as I call it, when you're matching them all up. Because we can't have a 5 out of 5 on all of them. Nobody can cope with that, because 5 out of 5 is the extreme version. So what is reasonable for you to cope with? Plotting this out physically really helps, because you suddenly start to see, oh wait, hang on, I've probably had some unrealistic expectations for myself here, because we all do it. But that again is something for you to consider. What are the stress factors that are affecting you? Okay. With burnout, we can make changes. We can look at our beliefs and behaviors. We can look at how we're engaging with active and passive rest to restore ourselves. We can look at where our personalities are affecting our work. So I need this. I feel at my best when running around like a blue ass fly and getting everything done and feeling like I'm just so busy and important. Is that healthy? Is that helping me? Beliefs, behaviors, right? We can look at plotting our stress. We can consider these things, but we also need resources. So speaking to your managers, speaking to your HR. Obviously, you guys here have got a group where you can share in a safe space away from work. It's psychologically safe because you shouldn't lose your status. Nobody's going to worry about it affecting your job if you're sharing privately here. We've also got law care. They've got the helpline, they've got resources, and they're constantly advocating for lawyers. If you've got mental health first aiders at work, you can use them as signposting to other services. You might have an employee assistance program at work as well. Speaking to your friends and family, not bottling this all up and expecting, again, I should be able to cope with this. Any phrase that starts with should, no, that's a terrible idea. Anything that says should is usually about an external or internal standard that we're applying to something that probably isn't realistic. Unless it's, I should definitely have a drink at the end of this, in which case you're fine. What else? What other resources do you have? People like me, people screaming into the void on LinkedIn all the time. I'm one of quite a large group now talking about burnout. Who are the people that you trust, that you can speak to, that you can create those psychologically safe spaces with, and to be able to talk about things honestly, rather than trying to conform to something that actually none of us are doing. Okay. That's everything that I was going to raise. I really hope that you guys have found that helpful. It is a whistle-stop tour for sure, but if anyone has any questions, pop them in the chat now. You can send them directly to me, or you can sit down them in front of everybody, or come on video, come off mute and talk to me. Don't let me talk into the void by myself.
Thank you so much, Leah. That was really interesting.
Thank you.
Especially the bit about anxiety being a maladaptive coping mechanism. That's a worry that I had roughly this time last year when I got my results for my higher rights of audience assessment and I passed. And I was like, it's because I was so stressed, that's why I passed. And yes, that really spoke to me. So thank you so much.
You're welcome.
I will pause the recording now so that everyone else can jump on.